the Q&A slide. So we'd like to let everyone know that at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A. Please, throughout our conversation today, please click the Q&A button on the screen. And if you don't see it, hit the More button on your screen where you see the three dots, and that will bring up a menu where you can select Q&A. You can submit your questions throughout, and we will, our plan is to get to as many questions as we can before we come to the end of our time this evening at 8 p.m. Sherilyn? Okay. All right. So with that being said, let me share with you, welcome again, and let me share with you what our plan is for this evening. We are together for about 90 minutes. The purpose of our time together, as you can see, is really we wanted to take this opportunity to provide some updates on the Ward 1 Stabilization Center. We want to share with you the process and timeline for moving forward. We wanted to share with you what our communication strategies are to establish and maintain an ongoing conversation with the community. And we wanted to open up and gather some input from you as stakeholders and community members this afternoon. Our outcomes, meaning at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you as community members and stakeholders have a broader base of knowledge of what's happening and the development process for the Park Road Stabilization Center. And we'd like to gather from you any issues that you want to make sure are any questions that you have today, and then any ongoing issues or that you would like to have us address as we move forward. Let me also share just a couple of things. As you know, this is our second community engagement here. We've learned from our first one, and we're really looking to bring some of those lessons to bear. We realized that there was, with how we've been moving forward, there have been questions and unanswered issues. So we're looking to address a lot of that tonight. An agenda for today is we're going to start with the welcome from our community leader and our DBH leader. We are going to share with you a project overview to let you know how the stabilization centers has been progressing. We're going to share with you where we are today with respect to the Park Road Stabilization Center. We will then share with you what you can expect to happen from this point forward. So what will happen next? And then we're going to talk to you about how we're planning to be intentional about reaching out to our community throughout this process. And then we'll close out with a Q&A. And during that Q&A, we are going to start first by answering the questions you so graciously shared during your registration. We have quite a number of to start with. And then we'll look to answer questions that you submit today. All right. As I said, my name's Regina. I will be your host for this evening. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our local community host, Council Member Nadeau.
Thank you so much, Regina. It's great to be here. Wonderful turnout tonight. I want to thank the Department of Behavioral Health, the Department of General Services, DC Health, our fire and EMS team, and we've got several A&C commissioners present tonight and other partners in Ward 1 and Columbia Heights, many community members. It's wonderful to be together tonight. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. So last year, Mayor Bowser committed critical resources to establish a stabilization center in Columbia Heights, which addresses a long-standing need in our community related to substance use disorder. This center is an important step forward in providing much-needed support to our neighbors. And like many of you, I spend a lot of time in the Civic Plaza, and I see this need just as you all have. It's not just on the plaza, though. It's all throughout Columbia Heights, Ward 1, and other parts of the city that we need to be providing these services. The Stabilization Center coming to our area will build on the vital work that is already being done by DBH by the community navigators that I've funded through District Bridges and other partners in Columbia Heights. And this new facility will help expand access to treatment and support for those struggling with substance use disorder. This will be such an important way to help those looking for support, and its proximity to the Civic Plaza and surrounding areas is critical. So we are really fortunate to have DBH leadership and other key government partners here with us today to share their insights from the district's first stabilization center, which opened in October of 2023, so now been operating a year. And that's at 35 K Street Northeast. And I'm excited to hear from them all about the timeline and the plans for the launch of our center, which is scheduled for early 2026. And also really look forward to hearing what our agency partners have to share and the community's questions and input. Your voices really are essential in this process. And I thank those of you who've submitted questions already and encourage you to stay throughout the meeting and fully engage. I really have always believed that a comprehensive approach to public health in all its forms, including critical services for people living with substance use disorder, is really important to the vibrancy of our community. And the health of our community relies on the good health of all of us. And I want to thank you all again. Thank our partners for your commitment and active participation. And I look forward to continuing this important conversation and working together to make a meaningful difference in our community. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you, Council Member. I will turn it over to Dr. Barbara Bazran to take us into the conversation today.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am really delighted to see so many members of the community participating in this event. What we hope to do today, as was said earlier, is really to provide you an update on where we are in developing our second stabilization center. And so to that end, we have Dr. David Wittberg, who is the interim medical director for Fire and Emergency Medical Services, Dr. Jonathan Shepard, who is our chief clinical officer, who's going to really talk to you about what happens when somebody hits the door of the stabilization center, and then what happens throughout that process until they're discharged. And then also Mr. Mohammed Jalal, who is with the Department of General Services, and they're responsible for the build-out contract, and he will be able to give you some sense of where we are. And then lastly, Dr. Sean Moise, who is our Deputy Director for Adult Services. And this particular project really is within his area of responsibility within the Department of Behavioral Health. So with that, I'd like to begin by giving you a brief overview of our current center, and that begins with our guiding principles. We have 6 guiding principles, and these really represent the foundation of our activities. And these are the building blocks upon which our center, our current center and our subsequent centers will be developed. 1, we are really committed to open communication and providing accurate, relevant, and timely information. So this community meeting is the second in a series that we will have between now and the opening of the center, because it's really important that we hear from you. We also prioritize safety and quality of life for all community members, and that includes not only the people who are receiving the care at the Stabilization Center, but also each of you who are living within the community. Your safety and quality of life is important. And I'm really happy to say that with the first center, which is located at 35 K Street, we have not had any safety issues. It's just not existed. What we find is that the people who come there are very respectful, and they indicate that the service is very useful for them, and it is a place where they feel they can go to get help. And I think that that really is a tribute to the level of staff that's there, as well as the fact that We really have built this as a low barrier facility that is designed to meet the needs of those who come through the door. We also want to build trust among you in terms of, being able to address any misconceptions that you might have and really ensure the fact that this center will be a positive addition to your community. We respect all perspectives and are really committed to a respectful dialogue. We really also want to say that I personally, as well as all of my team and our partners, believe in compassionate care. Compassion is critical, particularly for a population like those who are impacted by substance use disorders, who have often been dismissed or underserved. We have to have compassion for what the individuals in care are facing. We want to emphasize our role in saving lives and reducing opioid fatalities. That's the goal. You got to keep people alive and healthy so that they have the opportunity to move into recovery. And then lastly, we really are looking for every opportunity to capture your issues, your concerns, and insights and recommendations. Our goal is to make sure that this center is developed within the cultural context of the people who are going to be receiving care here. And we really need your input and to ensure that that happens. So, next slide, please. So, I want to just give you a snapshot of what our current center looks like. First of all, the center at 35 K Street, you can see what the inside of the center looks like. We have these recliners. When people come in, they have an opportunity to stabilize there. And also they have the opportunity to be connected to a peer or other services while they're there. But this is what it looks like. In the far back where you see the windows, those are the longer term areas where if somebody has a complex need or if they need to be by themselves because of where they are right now at that moment, then there is those private areas in the back where they can be. It is important to note that individuals who come into the center must be at least 18 years of age and experiencing a substance use disorder and be medically eligible for entrance. That means that if the person has a physical health problem that's so severe that they need an emergency room, they will be taken to an emergency room. Otherwise, they will be meet the medical criteria for the center. This is voluntary, free of charge. We don't require anything other than the fact that somebody wants to be there to get the help that we can offer. There is no insurance requirement, no citizenship requirement, and no gender restrictions. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the population of individuals who've come into the center over this past year have been mainly males, mainly African American, and of an average age of about 48 years, which means that most of the people who've come have really been suffering with their addiction for many years. Next slide, please. The services, we provide a range of services at the center. One of the things that we said, and we want to make sure everybody is aware of it, it was in one of the questions, the center is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day, and has been open every day since it opened on October 31st of last year. We provide both medical crisis and stabilization services to the individuals who walk through the door. It is low barrier, compassionate, person-centered care, and most people are there between 16 and 23 hours. If they have complex needs, like I talked about before, like for example, if they have a co-occurring mental health need, or if their status at the time they come requires that they need a little bit more time to stabilize, they can stay in the back area there in those beds. So we have seen over almost 2,800 unique individuals in the center, and most of them have been there multiple times, as you can see from the numbers there. We have had 55 individuals who've come in and who've had to use the extended stay unit. Next, please. The other question I often get when I'm out and about is how can somebody be connected to the center if they need that help? They can either be brought there by Fire and Emergency Medical Services, MPD, or they can be brought there by their community-based provider if they are connected to one, a family or a friend, or they can simply walk in the door. I must say that we have very few people who are being brought in by the police. Most people are being brought in by a family or friend, or are simply walking in the door and saying, I'd like to get some help. FEMS, Fire and Emergency Medical Services, is also bringing in nearly half of the individuals into the center. Most of the people who have come to the center at 35K are from wards 5 and 6. We have not seen people coming all the way across town to the center. And we do provide transportation for those individuals who need it upon discharge, either to go to their service provider because they have decided to go into residential care, or their home, or wherever they happen to live. So next slide, please. That gives you a sense of where we are. So now what I'd like to do is have Dr. Wittberg talk a little bit about Fire and Emergency Medical Services role.
Thank you, Dr. Bazran. David Wittberg, I'm the interim medical director for DC Fire and EMS. And I kind of wear two hats. One is as the medical director for Fire and EMS, but I'm also an emergency physician in one of the district's busiest emergency departments. So emergency departments are profoundly overcrowded and simply don't have the resources to provide comprehensive wraparound care for patients with substance use disorder the way the DCSC is set up to do so. Getting patients to the right place at the right time the first time is what we aim for at DC Fire and EMS. And we know that if we get patients with substance use disorders that meet our inclusion criteria to the DCSC, it improves their outcomes. It gives them a better chance of entering long-term rehab and making recovery. It also has the very nice side effect of decompressing our emergency departments to better serve the rest of us when we have an emergency that needs to be attended to. The DCSC model also fits into our EMS system model of specialty care centers. So when you're having a stroke, we try to bring you to a comprehensive stroke center. When you're having a heart attack, we want to bring you to a hospital that can rapidly do a cardiac catheterization. When you're suffering from trauma, we want to bring you to one of our district's 3 trauma centers. Similarly, when you're suffering from a substance use disorder, we want to make sure that we bring those patients to the most appropriate center where they're going to get the most comprehensive and compassionate care. And that's what the DCSC is set up to do. The DCSC also serves as a receiving center for patients in the district that are treated by what's called our mobile integrated healthcare team when our paramedics give out a medication called buprenorphine, which is a medication that can help patients enter long-term recovery from substance use disorders. As Dr. Bazran said, we transported a little over 2,500 patients to 35K since it opened last Halloween. The drop time, meaning the time it takes for our ambulance to arrive, unload the patient, give report, and then leave and return to service, is around 30 minutes. And it's an important metric to look at because when our ambulances transport patients to hospitals, their drop times often exceed 1 hour because of hospital overcrowding. And that lowers the amount of units that are available to respond to the next emergency, the next person that calls 911. So by having a center like the DCSC available with such a short drop time, meaning such an efficient system for taking patients in and allowing our units to return to service, we maintain a more resilient state where we can respond to the next emergency. And I think Dr. Bazran pointed out where most of the admissions came from wards 5 and 6. We also very, very closely track the ability of our EMS clinicians to discern if a patient is safe to be transported to the DC Stabilization Center. We look at what we call kind of the rate at which patients move from the DC Stabilization Center to hospital emergency departments, and that has been at or below 3.5% since we opened up 35 K Street. So our EMS providers, our EMTs and paramedics are doing an incredibly good job at following our protocols and the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we set up, determining which patients are safe to transport to the DCSC. Next slide. We track a ton of metrics with regard to the current DCSC at 35 K Street. This is one of the metrics that we track. It's a heat map of when patients arrive to the center. And you can see that the green colors are lower input times. The yellows and the reds are the times of highest input. You can see that there's a pretty logical distribution of when patients arrive to the DCSC. There's a preponderance of arrival over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and after 12 noon and in the early evening hours of 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dr. Bazran pointed out that there's actually been a shift when we opened up 35K. Most of the patients initially came to the center via ambulance. But over time, as the friendly faces, as we call them, that are treated at the DCSC became more familiar with the operation, they would arrive there by foot. And so the amount of traffic went down while the amount of patients being served at the center increased. And with that, I will turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to jump in here just a moment, Dr. Vidberg. Once again, Regina Perkins, your host today, your MC. I just want to remind everyone, and I'm going to ask Chairlyn to come on and say again in Spanish, we do have a Spanish translation channel that you can sign up for. And I would also like to remind people that we are not taking questions real time. We have a lot of information to share based on all the questions we got in initially. So we're going to share all this with you, and we're looking to reserve a good 45 minutes or so for Q&A. So there will be ample time ideally for Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for entering your question, and we will quickly look to get as many answered as we can. Let me turn it over to Chairlyn just again to let people know who may have come late about our Spanish translation. Okay. I'm not sure Chairlyn can get over here, but all right. So let me introduce Dr. Jonathan Shepard to take us through the patient experience. Thank you.
And thank you. And good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you all today. I do want to give proper acknowledgement to Councilmember Nadeau and to the Director of the Department of Behavioral Health, Dr. Barbara Bazran, who is serving as my boss, who serves as my boss. And wonderful collaboration with both of our community partners who are present today with Dr. Vidberg and DGS. I just want to share with you what happens with the patient experience at the Stabilization Center. You've already heard that once a person enters into the Stabilization Center, they've already been screened. If they've come through the FIMS department, they've already been screened. And if they come in on foot, the persons who meet them at the door warmly, they will conduct a screening to make sure that there are no pressing medical issues. We are very in detail about that criteria, as I help personally work with FIMS and with this medical staff there at the Stabilization Center at 35K to develop this criteria. And I'm thankful that So far, we have had wonderful success with that. And as Dr. Vitberg has mentioned, if someone is in need of having to go back out to the hospital or to the emergency room, we can quickly call for another ambulance to send that person back to that particular facility if need be. Once you enter in, let's go forward with that. We're going to address any immediate personal care needs. Uh, that means that if food is needed, if laundry services need a shower, to address all of those personal care needs. As we walk down to number 3,
And Dr.
we
Shepherd,
can
I'm going to ask you
administer
to turn
crisis stabilization
the video
and
off just a moment so we can hear you clearly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that better?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Okay. And number 3, we administer crisis stabilization and support services. You'll be connected to a peer counselor or recovery coach. And that's again to address the patient's needs and readiness for change. And it's one of those things that we really take pride in, make sure that we have the proper people there. Dr. Basra mentioned how we will have persons who may come multiple times, and maybe on that 30th or 31st try, they are now ready to enter into services that could help them in treating their substance use disorder. One of the things that I have personally seen through some of our treatment planning is that people will return who have gone through the services or through the treatment services, and they'll be so happy to show us how they were actually able to obtain a lease, able to obtain housing, when gone through those particular services. On available harm reduction and medication for opioid use disorders, treatment resources. And again, that could include medication assessment treatment, which may include buprenorphine, as Dr. Vitberg mentioned. But we want to make sure that we have the proper people in place, that if someone is ready for harm reduction medication treatment practices or services, that we have those available. We also have other relief medications on standby if anyone's having any withdrawal side effects. And then as the person's ready to end their time at the Stabilization Center, we will coordinate continued care management through community-based treatment and referrals for continued support upon discharge. And again, I have just watched firsthand how we develop strong partnerships and collaborations that people have the proper place to go upon discharge. So the patient experience at the DC Stabilization Center outlined right before you. Just want to give a personal touch as to how our patients and consumers who come there and how they're benefited from this service.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shepherd. Appreciate that. Once again, wanting to remind people to use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen to any questions you have. And once again, we will get to as many questions as possible today. Would like to turn this over now to Mohammed Jallo to talk to us about next steps. What's happening next?
All right. Thank you very much, Regina. Good evening, everyone. Mohammed Jallo with Department of General Services, Capital Construction Division. I am the project executive program leader with the Tenant Improvement and Government Assets Group. I've had the privilege of working with DBH on not one, but now the second Sobering and Stabilization Center. Along with DBH, DGS has been able to procure services for a design, build, delivery contract. Our design builder team consists of Atmos Construction, as well as Moya, who have done tremendous amount of work throughout the district on a lot of projects. Right now, they've been working diligently, countless number of hours throughout the week, multiple meetings per week to work on the development of the site. Currently, right now, we are working on the design structural preservation plans. What that ultimately means is we're working with CFA and HPO to make sure that we are keeping intact the historic fabric of the firehouse, but at the same time, making sure that we can implement DBH's mission for the Sobering and Stabilization Center and that it meets the programmatic needs. We meet on a consistent basis to make sure that we are flushing out all of the design requirements as well as all of the programmatic design requirements. Currently, right now, we have started the lead, asbestos, and abatement program within the facility. If you have a little bit of knowledge of the facility prior to, unfortunately, it was riddled with a lot of lead abatement and asbestos. So our requirement before we can start any of the construction is to safely abate that space. Once we're done with the lead abatement and asbestos, we'll continue on with the development of the design. We're currently wrapping up the conceptual design, and a conceptual design is really just that phase where we get input from the programming DBH. We also get input, as we're doing right now, from the community, and then we also make sure that we can put together what is more of a conceptual design to hit layout, indicating exactly what spaces are required, accommodating that with, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the programmatic needs. As we continue through the conceptual design, we'll move into the next phases of the design and ultimately have an estimated turnover completion of spring 2026. This goes without any loss of time when you talk about the efforts that DBH, the design build team, Moya, and Atmos, along with DGS, has to put into implementing the overall design of the project. We have taken the overall footprint and also concept of what was delivered over at 35 K Street and implementing them with the needs that are required over in Ward 1. So as we continue to successfully implement the programmatic needs, we will progress with the design and then have a fruitful turnover in spring of 2026. Regina?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Okay, I know we're giving you a lot of information. We've got one more speaker here. Once again, remind you to put your questions in as we go so we can jump into those soonest. I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jean-Moïse to take us to our final thing, community collaboration and engagement.
Thank you, Regina. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Jean-Moïse with DBH, responsible for adult services within the district. And I'm really pleased to be here to share a little more with the rest of the team, our vision for this center and how we hope and expect it will significantly improve well-being and the health of many of our citizens in Ward 1. Consistent with what the district does when we launch such large projects, and consistent with Dr. Bazran's guidelines, operating principles that she mentioned in the beginning, one of our major priorities and focus is to make sure that as we proceed, we're very, very early on in the process. Nothing's been decided, nothing's been finalized. We're still working with Historic Preservation and Review Board, who requires a lot of oversight and sign off on everything we do moving forward in that buildings. But as we move forward over the next few months, we want to make sure that we personify the commitment we've made to the community by working to develop with the council members' office and ANCs in the community a community advisory team. And that would be selected by you all, obviously representing the community, including stakeholders, consumers, family members, business interests, and everyone. And we've done this before in the district, not on a project I've worked with, but this is common practice with the district. And the vendor that we're working with to launch this project has done so working in other communities in concert with district government. So Over the next few months, we hope to, in addition to the ongoing pathways and platforms that where we will have ongoing communication and collaboration, we want to make sure we participate in the development of a community advisory team that will serve to guide, provide input, and ongoing collaboration and support for the project throughout the whole phase of the development until launch. Some of the key elements of that contract, and it's actually an agreement signed by all the parties involved, including DBH, Department of Health, FEMS, and DGS, and the representative of the community advisory team, looking at issues that are important to the community's wellness, well-being, and functionality, including the roles and responsibilities of the various parties, maintaining the property and ensuring it's safe and secure, looking at community safety and wellness, ensuring that the conduct and the behavior of those that participate in the program are conducive and consistent with community expectations, and also then creating, again, with the support of the advisory team, ongoing communication and partnership pathways to ensure that folks are well informed and have input into the process. Next slide, please. How we anticipate this will happen, especially the development of this community advisory team. We hope to work with Councilmember Nadeau's office and the ANCs to develop that process and to participate in that process and to support that effort. In addition, to ensure we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in that community and continue to provide all the support necessary, DBH will continue to provide outreach to members in the community through our state opioid response teams and grantee partners, through our Access Helpline, our 988 line, our community response team that responds to crises, as well as neighborhood and community providers that we work with. So we see this as a partnership, working closely with community and providers to ensure a successful launch and one that meets the needs of the whole community and all its members. Lastly, I wanted to mention at the very top of the slide that we're about to launch a new mailbox, dbh.parkroaddcsc@dc.gov, where the community members can feel free to submit questions, concerns, offer recommendations and suggestions. We're fielding those questions and responding to them ongoing on a regular basis. And we will use those questions as well as the ones we get today to inform our work moving forward, especially once the community advisory team is established. Looking forward to working with you all, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moise. So this is the part that I'm sure many of you have been waiting for. If we can go to the next slide as well, just to have that up in the background for the Q&A again. Want to remind you to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We've gotten a handful of questions already, so let me get started with those. What we're going to do is we're going to bring all of our panelists back up on the screen, plus our ASL interpreter. I would like to start with the questions we captured during our Zoom registration. When you registered, we created a space for you to put a question in. So we have a few of those up there. So yes, Tyler, you can drop the slides. Let's put our panelist up. Okay, so while this is not a perfect process, we are excited to be starting this next stage of an ongoing dialogue with the community about this Stabilization Center. So let me just jump in, and if something doesn't sound right or feel right, please feel free to just put something in the Q&A, and we'll see what we can address today. And if we can address it today, we'll look to address it after today's conversation. Let me start with the first question that we received in our registration. It was, what increased noise should nearby residents expect? So I'm going to turn that over to Mohammed. If you could take the first stab at answering that.
Yes, definitely. So there will be an increase of noise due to construction. Ultimately, per DOB requirements, we are regulated to start work at 7 a.m. and conclude work by 7 p.m. Any after hours work would need to be requested via a special permit by DOB. But ultimately, the decibel requirement by DOB does not exceed a certain limit, which would not disturb the overall community. There are regulations in reference to what our decibel level would be, but ultimately, since we're not doing a raise of any of the buildings, meaning that we're not demoing any buildings, all of the noise levels will be confined to the interior portion of the building, and any additional outside noise levels would just be trucks moving in and out when it comes to construction. We don't imagine that the overall noise level is going to be a disturbance to the community.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. And I should state that as you are putting questions in, even if you have a question to something that's stated, do share that, because we are actively trying to pull your questions as they come in and make sure they get addressed in context with other questions. So the next question up is, what is the plan to ensure that residents and neighboring homes are kept safe? That was a question that came in during registration. Dr. Bazran, I'm going to turn that over to you, or you can direct it elsewhere if you choose.
Certainly. Thank you. First of all, one of the things I'd like to share is that we really have not had safety issues related to our first stabilization center. The other thing to note is that we do have security on site, and security has not had to be mobilized at all. We will have a safety plan in place to any issues that might arise.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Next question. Actually, I'm going to direct this one to you as well, Dr. Bazran. How can residents request help for someone to actually utilize the center, go into the center?
It's very easy. They can simply walk the door, or they can call 988, which is our emergency line. Or if the person is connected to a core service agency or one of our agencies, they can be brought that way. But in most instances, we find that individuals, here again, the majority are being brought by their family members to the facility, or they're walking in the door. The other thing that Dr. Wittberg had in his slide, but I don't think said out loud, and that is that the other thing is that if somebody is laying on the ground and looks like they need support, fire and EMS services can retrieve them, see if they want to go to the center, and then take them there. And if Dr. Wittberg, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I would echo that. Our patients, we don't, if they're intoxicated, we won't specifically ask them where they want to go. We'll take them to the right place. And if they meet inclusion criteria above the age of 18, they're alert, their vital signs are within a normal range, they're not suicidal, they're not combative. And as Dr. Bazran mentioned, they're not in need of higher, more complex medical care. And they would be best served by going to a treatment center like the DCSC. That's where we'll bring them.
Thank you, Dr. Wittberg. I do want to just amplify one of our first questions about noise level. One of the comments that came in, we're expecting that the noise level will not exceed 80 decibels. So that was just another data point that came in that I would have wanted to share from that first question. Next question I'm going to direct to probably Dr. Shepard. Explain the entire process from intake to care while they're in discharge. I know you went through that, Dr. Shepard, but if you could just give us a quick overview just so we can effectively address that question.
Absolutely. I'm going to turn my video off just to make sure it stays stable.
Thank you.
There is no wrong door. We have a low barrier, as has been mentioned, as far as admission criteria. Once a person has come in, they are assessed to see what their needs are. After, of course, they've been screened to make sure they're medically clear. They're given food, shower. Their personal needs are evaluated. And we are there to make sure that the person is taken care of, respected as they go through this process. While there will be persons there that can meet with peer counseling and coaching. And I'll just mention that that is actually, if you look at the data, that actually those persons are one of the biggest driving factors for people wanting to make a change. And so people who can understand what they're going through, that is so important. And so I just want to lift that up, that peer counseling and coach recovery aspect, that is so important. And then upon discharge, we want to make sure that they're connected. We have transportation available for those persons that once they're stabilized, that they are moving to the next place once they are ready for treatment.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so now we've got a couple of questions just about the facility itself, and these are still from the registration. One is, will the front gate enclosing the alley remain up? Mohammed, can you address that?
Yeah, so we're still in development right now with the design. So that is a TBD. We haven't gotten to that part of the design. So we don't have, unfortunately, right now, an answer that we can provide you.
Okay, so just so you know, guys, we are documenting all these questions and the answers to them. And so we will be clear about which ones we need to follow up with you on. All right, the next one was also talking about the site itself. It's like, what's the expected duration and operating hours for construction? Mohammed, that might be you as well.
Yeah, so the duration of the construction is going to last until uh, the springtime of 2026. Operations of construction are per DOB permit. So that is Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If we are to work extended hours, we would have to request a extended hour permit from DOB.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next one, and we have a couple of really long ones in here, but let me just, this is our first fuller one. So this one, I'm going to ask you, Dr. Bazran, to address. It says, I believe that the agency projected 26 beds during the first community meeting earlier this year. I'd like to confirm planning and design is still open, the first part of the question, or is the question, is planning and design still open? There's a sense that we want to maximize the use of space and get as many treatment beds as possible. So 26 was the anticipated number of beds, and they want to confirm that that's still open and available to be impacted.
Design is open, and we will have the number of beds that can fit into the space and that can meet all of the facility requirements. There are, space requirements, but and that is open. That has not been finalized at this point.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nadeau, I'm going to ask you to take on this next one. All right, so this is one coming in from Q&A today. Why was there no community engagement prior to the meeting that was held at the high school on 16th Street several months ago, where we were told we had no choice and that the center was a done deal? So looking for some feedback there.
Thanks for the question. And I'm glad, again, that we're all here together tonight. And I'm glad that some of you also were able to join the earlier engagement. So when we are looking to provide a public good here in the District of Columbia, we often use spaces that we own because it reduces costs and it allows us to manage the space a little bit better. The original proposal for Columbia Heights several years ago, the RFP that went out, was looking for an operator who had space in Columbia Heights or who could acquire space in Columbia Heights. Not surprisingly, there were no responses to that RFP, and I think there was even a subsequent one that was similarly phrased. And so then it became the task of our government to identify space that we could use. And actually, some members of the ANC and I were out on a walk, and they had suggested why not use this Park Road building, which made its way up to the mayor. And frankly, having done processes like these before, for example, for when we put short-term family housing for families experiencing homelessness in every ward, we found that really the best use of our resources as a government and as a city are to utilize buildings that we own. Of course, property in Columbia Heights, which is the location that the mayor decided she really wanted this, which I support and I'm excited about because we have a great need in Columbia Heights. Property in Columbia Heights is very difficult to come by. So we are fortunate that we do have this publicly owned site. And identifying the site was the first step in this process. And now we are together with the community going through the rest of the steps, which is to determine what the program will be, to address community concerns through a good neighbor agreement, and to remain in close contact as construction goes about and as the design process moves forward. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of the thought process and also the elapsed time. This idea was proposed several years ago, and it will still be a year or two more before it actually opens up. So I think it's important that we're here together now, in the middle of this journey to work out some of the community concerns.
Thank you so much for that. And I just want to reiterate, as we're going through and you're hearing these answers, I'm sure that will spur more questions. So please feel free to just add them in. If we don't get to them today, we will absolutely keep them as part of our ongoing conversation that we're really looking to maintain here. Okay, next question, Dr. Bazran, let me send this one to you. Is the budget for renovations fully funded, or will part of it be appropriated next year?
Sorry, our budget is funded.
Okay, all right.
That's a question. We have the Stabilization Center. There are two pieces to it. One is a piece that is related to the ongoing operations of the center. The other is the capital construction. Those are two very distinct parts. And we plan to move forward at this point with that. That's where we are.
Awesome, thank you. This next one, I'll go ahead and direct that to you as well, if you don't mind. Given the large Spanish-speaking community in the neighborhood, the question really is there anything in place to ensure that people are getting help directly in Spanish versus having to go through something like Language Line or a third-party translator? So really, language, Dr. Bazran or...
No, I'd be happy to speak to that. One of the things that I indicated in my remarks is that it's really important to provide these services within the cultural context, period. And so one of the requirements that we will put into the RFA as we solicit a contractor will be that they must have Spanish-speaking staff. We have put staff restrictions in our existing contract. In addition to that, 51% of the staff will also have to be from the District of Columbia, district residents.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Dr. Wittberg, let me send this one your way. I would like to know about practices in place for those late night intake patients brought in by fire, EMS, and ambulances. I'm not sure, Dr. Wittberg, if this is really focused on the noise issue or about how they're going to be be processed differently.
So as a reminder, DC Fire and EMS brought in about 2,500 patients to 35K. That works out to be about 6 per day. So there have been some questions in the question stream about ambulances every hour, and that's just not the way it works. There'll be on average about 1 ambulance every 4 hours if you do the math. The input to the center does go up on the weekends and evenings. Our protocols, which our EMTs and paramedics follow, will dictate in a very granular fashion the route which the ambulance is to approach the center, turning off lights and sirens, not letting vehicles idle. So we'll work on making this as peaceful a process as possible, making sure that, again, there's a limitation to the use of lights and sirens, a limitation to vehicles idling. When we opened up 35K, we supplied all 2,100 members of our department with very, very detailed maps about where to pull up, where to drop off, and so forth. So I anticipate we'll do the same for this center.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I have a bigger one here. I'm going to throw this one to you, Councilmember Nadeau. It's really what type of outreach was done on the part of the city to engage the community stakeholders prior to the project moving out of the idea phase. And there's just a concern here about, it's like we can't go back and restart it, but there's just a sense of how, I think the real question is, how serious is this effort to open up and maintain a community conversation? Because there's a sense that it just moved fast.
Sure. And I can't speak for the whole government here,
Got it.
because, selection, I'm not the one who makes the choices, but I will say that it is very common and wise when we are trying to provide a public good that we use government property. It had been widely known through, I mean, I know it was in my newsletter a couple times that we were excited that this idea was happening. And we've had a lot of community discussions that the mayor was looking for a location in Columbia Heights. And the idea had been out there for a couple years because, as I mentioned earlier, there were no responses to the RFPs that were feasible. And so ultimately, the mayor did what governments do when they're trying to provide a public good, which is choosing a publicly owned property in the vicinity that they're trying to provide services. And sometimes the community does not get consulted on the selection of the site. That was the case when we opened up short-term family housing all across the city. Again, because when we're providing a public good and we want to use our own property, there are limited options. And I understand that that's frustrating for some people. And while the selection of the site and the location of this program is not up for debate, there are a lot of opportunities as we move forward for the community to provide input on the program, on the way that the building operates, and on other concerns that exist in the community. And I have read through everything in the Q&A, and I know that we'll get to a lot of it. But I think people are mostly concerned about how is this going to impact our neighborhood and how is it going to impact our day-to-day lives? And those are very legitimate concerns.
Mhm.
And I do believe that we will be able to address some of them tonight, that we will be able to lay the groundwork for how issues will be addressed on an ongoing basis tonight, and that some of it we will simply have to prove to the public through implementation that we take seriously these concerns. So I hope that that's helpful and clear and as direct as possible, so that people understand that that I hear the question, and that's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. I do just want to note, because I am looking at all the questions that have come in. And first of all, I just want to thank you. We have well over 50 questions that have come in already, and we are diligently working our way through them. That last question, actually, that's a theme throughout many of these questions. So for those of you that put those in there, unless I see something very distinctly different from that of like, how come we didn't know, or what's the plan forward? I'm going to save those to answer in the, in FAQs, but there are multiple questions with that same theme. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. The next question I'd like to lean on is, there was a question here about the heat map. Is the heat map seasonal? Is that showing a seasonal view? Dr. Wittberg?
That's just kind of a summative view of our first year experience. It's more or less going to stay consistent again with the majority of input coming during evening and weekend hours.
Awesome, thank you. There was, for those, and these next two are very similar. I'll turn these over to you, Councilmember Nadeau. For those, it said, when will the recording of this meeting be uploaded online? How can I access it? And for those that were not able to get their questions answered this evening. Will the city commit to getting the answers down into a document and sent out to participants? So basically, people are asking, how can they get the transcript and any unanswered questions?
I'm going to defer to DBH on that because this is their Zoom account.
Oh, that's probably a good idea. All right, I'll turn that over. That's community engagement. So either Dr. Bazran or Dr. Moise.
We certainly do plan to put together information so that we can send it out to the community, and we will do that as soon as possible. The other thing, though, I wanted to share earlier is Councilmember Nadeau also has community engagement sessions and ongoing meetings with the ANC. And that's also an opportunity, another opportunity to provide input. And we are in communication with Councilmember Nadeau, who shares those concerns with us so that we can, as the government agency responsible for implementing the center, can address those. So there are multiple pathways. I just want to make sure people know that.
Awesome. Thank you. So this one, Dr. Moise, I'm going to send this one to you. 14 here. How does the Stabilization Center work with the surrounding area to address ongoing concerns? Like, is there an advisory committee? They want to know if there's made up, that's the question. Is there an advisory committee? If so, of whom?
In our current location, 35K Northeast, we do not have an community advisory team or committee because the area is much more commercial. It's a very large government building, and we've had a history of having services there without any issue or concern. So I see this proposed site and our plan to house the next center in Columbia Heights as being very different. So as I've said earlier, we'll work with the council members' teams and platforms to engage and maintain communication with the community. We'll work with the ANCs. We'll support in any way we can the development of a neighborhood or community advisory team, and we promise to work closely with them. So we don't have an advisory team or a committee we work with today because the circumstances are different today at the first site, but we're committed to do so moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Moise. I want to talk a bit. There are a couple of questions here. So just know if you said anything about the movement of traffic in the area, I'm going to try to address it with this one question here, directing this to you, Mohammed. The intersection, around this area, even Park and Homestead, Park and 14th, it's already a busy intersection and congested. The question really is there any coordination with DDOT to mitigate the increased traffic the facility might bring to this residential area?
If we're talking about increased traffic during the construction time, that's one distinctive question or an answer that we need to get squared away. But if we're talking about during the construction time, ultimately there is traffic control plans that need to be submitted. If there is any obstruction or modifications or changes to the traffic pattern during construction, that gets submitted over to DDOT by the general contractor, which needs to be approved before we can move forward with any modification of traffic patterns. Other than that, the traffic pattern will stay the same, or if it stays the same, there's no requirement to reach out to DDOT and do any coordination or receive a traffic control approval for a permit.
Okay, and I don't know that you addressed this because there were when I put the multiple questions together, it was about during construction, and then it was also about when ambulances were dropping patients off regularly. They're worried about that being a choke up, a traffic jam there.
So in reference to operations, that's probably better for the DBH team to provide a response.
Thank you. Dr. Basra?
Yes, and I think Dr. Bitberg can also weigh in on this. We have not had that as a major issue. There have been times when there have been several ambulances there because the drop-off time is so quick. And the turnaround time is so quick. We have not found that to be a major issue, but it's something certainly to explore. And I'll turn it to Dr. Vitberg. He knows a little bit more about how the ambulance works.
Yeah, so I've noticed in the question stream a couple questions about again vehicles idling, noise generated by ambulance drop off. I want to reiterate that there's about 6 ambulance arrivals per day, on average one every 4 hours. I would urge everybody that hasn't taken a field trip to walk by 35K. There's other questions about disruptive noise outside of the center. I can tell you that both outside of the center and inside the center where the patients are being treated, it's actually very quiet. It's a peaceful environment. One of the goals of the center is to get people that need to be off of the street into treatment into a building and out of the public site. I've been to 35K a number of times to both visit, become more familiar with the operation, once or twice deal with some patient-related questions. There often are no ambulances there, or if there are ambulances, there may be one parked on the side by the ramp. Again, lights and sirens off, not idling, and that'll be my direction when we go live at the Park Heights address.
All right, thank you. So there is one other question here just about this, the movement of not just cars, but people. It's acknowledging here, and this one where I've bunched a couple of them together. 35K Street is located in a largely non-residential zone. Columbia Heights is a vibrant community. What's the plan for, it's a couple of things here, and I'll start with you on this, Dr. Bazran, but it's like, what's the plan to remove what people believe are non-local residents once they have received treatment, and in keeping the unhoused people, the number of unhoused people from skyrocketing is the gist of the question. Dr. Bazran?
First of all, based on our experience, we haven't had people loitering outside the building, which is what this seems to be referring to. We haven't had loitering outside the building before people go in or after they leave. When people leave, it's been, very peaceful. And here again, many are taken, transported actually, to either their provider or to their home or to wherever they are living. And we have not seen that as a problem. However, if that does become a problem, then we certainly will have to address that issue and come up with a solution. But that has not been the situation. And I can tell you, I have been around the country looking at other centers, other stabilization centers, and I haven't seen people loitering around them either. Why, I can't tell you, but that's the experience that I've seen in San Francisco when I've looked there, in New York City when I've looked there, and certainly here in DC.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Mohammed, I'm going to direct this next ones to you. One is it's two parts. One is it's just talking about the challenges with operating with an older building. They're asking about lead, asbestos, and any rodent issues. What, if anything, has been done in that area or is planned?
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, we are starting the lead abatement and asbestos abatement process within the project. About a year ago, when we started the pre-planning and looking at the facility, we did have an industrial hygienist enter into the building and conduct a hazardous material report. In that hazardous material report, they identified all of the lead contaminant and asbestos that required to be abated and removed from the building. So we have started that process. We started that process last week. So we will proceed throughout the construction phase to remove the lead, asbestos, and abatement.
Awesome. Thank you. This next one I'll also direct to you, Mohammed, is when does the design go before the Historic Review Commission?
So we're as I mentioned earlier as well, we are currently working with HPO and CFA. We have been talking about what the requirements are and what the desires are of HPO. So we're currently in that process right now, working with HPO and CFA.
Okay. And this one is, I'm trying to at least group some of these together, but I don't, this one stands out. It's like, once the center is up and running, will MPD be allowed to declare this as a drug-free zone? The concern is that that a rehab center could be a target for drug sellers, and they want to make sure that there's something done to control or influence that in the environment. Dr. Bazran, can I start with you?
Yeah, I can't respond to that because I don't know the answer to that question. It's something that we would have to look into. I mean, I can't speak for MPD.
Excellent. Thank you. So as I shared earlier, any questions that we get after our time today or that we can't respond to, we'll look to get those gathered up, get some answers, and get those in our next conversation or get those out to you between conversations. Okay. Based on the discussions, this is for you, Dr. Shepard. Based on the discussion so far, the facility seems focused on opioid overdose. However, we know that most of the needs in Columbia Heights comes in the form of substance use disorders, including alcohol use disorder. How will individuals in distress be triaged after intake? And I think you've addressed this some, but is there anything you'd just like to highlight about the unique requirements in the neighborhood?
Yes. So let me just address that quickly. One of the things that we have discovered, it really is not a surprise to me, is that the most common substance use disorder is alcohol use disorder, overwhelmingly, actually. So once again, we are already in tune with what the data is saying, what the community is showcasing or displaying, which is alcohol use disorder. And yes, we are also prepared to handle those persons who have opioid use disorders. But I just want to let the people know alcohol use disorder is the number one issue that we're seeing at the current stabilization center.
Regina, Captain Duro is there from MPD, and so he may want to address that question. I see Captain Duro.
Okay, you mean the question regarding MPD and the drug-free zone? Okay, we can see what we can do to get him mic'd up here, and I'll come back to that. Captain, if you're able to come on, just come on video, and we'll get you in to answer that question. Thank you, Dr. Bazran. Until then, this question would like to direct to council member. This one is the question in general is about the city government's management of neighborhood and city facilities, and it's making it's a concern for the neighborhood. So the question is, what assurances will the city provide going forward about the management of this facility?
Great question. So I do think, I'm hoping we still have time to get to some discussion tonight about the Good Neighbor Agreement. That is sort of the city's contract with the community when it comes to this facility. So I will say we have a process we're going to go through to ensure the community knows what to expect and also how to raise concerns when they arise. And I know that DBH will constantly be evaluating this site and ensuring that it is working for both its consumers and the community. When it comes to physical maintenance of the space, that will be the Department of General Services. And it's up to all of us to ensure that if there are issues with the outside of the facility, that we report that and it can get into the maintenance queue. And then the grantee, the operator, will be working directly with the Department of General Services to ensure the interior maintenance meets the needs of the facility as well. So there are a lot of different processes in place, but I think the one most relevant to tonight's discussion is that Good Neighbor Agreement, which will continue. I hope we'll start tonight, but also continue to refine as we go throughout this process.
Yeah, I'd also like to respond to that question.
Okay.
That the Department of Behavioral Health also has a project manager who is responsible for providing oversight and support of the Stabilization Center. And one of the roles is to make sure that the facility, that the environment of care is maintained. So everything from, for example, I can give you an example of when we noticed that because all of the treatment staff are on the floor, we found that, for example, there was some damage to the wall. DGS was contacted immediately. It was immediately fixed. Anything that is identified on site, we do reach out to get that repaired immediately because environment of care is very important. And the surrounding area is very important. And so we want to make sure that we maintain the facility so that that people feel that care and kindness and compassion that they need as they enter the facility. So we have a full-time person who will have oversight of both of the facilities and will be there frequently and be able to identify issues that come up inside or outside the building, and then be in contact with DGS, as Councilmember Nadeau said, so that we can get those things repaired.
Okay, thank you. Let me just go to a real direct one right away. It's please explain how and when trash will be collected from the facility, because there is a concern in the neighborhood. I can offer that. I know we're not maybe that department, but is there anyone who wants to take a stab at that one?
Regina, I'll address that. And again, both in terms of biomedical waste and regular trash, we are very much on top of that with the current center. Obviously, for safety and wellness reasons, not an issue. We ensure that we have a contract, and the schedule of pickup is commensurate and appropriate to the demand and what we need, and that's not at all been an issue in terms of our current center, and we'll make sure we maintain that practice.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ruiz. Okay, so I'm going to try to pull a couple of these together that are hitting on a common theme.
Regina, I wanted to make you aware that Captain Duro
Yes.
from MPD is available, just so you know.
Oh, is available. I'm here.
He's on camera.
Okay, I'm hearing that his mic is not active. I don't know, Emily, is that true? Or Tyler?
I think I should be okay. Can
Oh,
you hear me?
perfect. There you are.
Yeah, I'm
Wonderful.
here. I'm
Thank
here.
you so much.
So going back to the drug-free zone question, there's two types of drug-free zones in DC. The first is kind of the permanent ones, which are established in legislation around certain facilities like schools and playgrounds, public housing. This kind of facility is not on that list right now, so that would require legislative change to get the permanent drug-free zone around there. The temporary ones, which have been in the news lately, are temporary areas that are established based very much on data, so on arrest data and crime data. And I don't think there'd be any prohibition to establishing one in that area if it became warranted based off of those data. That's where you put up the signs, and I think this would be the kind of facility where we are required by law to notify them that we are doing so. So there would be a notification going out to the Stabilization Center if that were ever to occur.
Okay, thank you so much, Captain.
Okay.
All right. So let me go to two more that I see together, and I'm gonna highlight Dr. Shepard first and then Dr. Vidberg. I've gotten questions from neighbors. This is for you, Dr. Shepard. I've gotten questions from neighbors around concerns with the volume of people traffic. Some people are concerned about lines out the door. Can you speak to this?
Yes, I can speak to it. Well, first of all, I'm the interim medical director over at 35K, so I'm over there just about every day. So no, there are no lines standing outside of people coming in. They are greeted by people who know how to bring the folks in a way that is warm and welcoming. And I really stress that because when a person is inebriated or going through a withdrawal or going through a substance use disorder, it is very important to make sure that we have the right approach. And so I can say that we are very sensitive to those persons as they come in. So there's no one standing outside. There's no long line. And pretty much once they're in the medical screening, they're taken right into the room where you see the recliners. So the wait time, even in the lobby, is very short.
I can just
Thank you.
elaborate a little bit too.
Oh,
Our treatment protocols do not permit our EMTs and paramedics to transport patients to the stabilization center that are combative or agitated. So those patients must be transported to an emergency department because they may require, additional testing, chemical restraint. So having that construct in place in our treatment protocols also helps mitigate any issues with noise.
and I would just like to say that we actually hosted a visit to the Stabilization Center by a number of members of your community, and they saw firsthand what was there. Jeremy, I think you were there, and there, that's right, and you can attest to what you saw there. And there were not people laying on the ground or outside or, uh, uh, boisterous or any of that. And so I do invite people who have some concerns if they want to make a visit. They certainly can. And we would look forward to hosting you.
Awesome. Okay, I have time here for just a few more, 2 or 3 more questions. I do want to highlight one theme of questions that's coming up. It's taken me a while to pull them all together, but it's basically looking at, it's going back to this feeling in the community that they're coming into the conversation after it's underway and that the site is chosen. And there might be 7 or 8 questions that I'm seeing in this space about, why this space, and then more importantly, why are we so hyper focused on this rehab? So I just wanted to come back to that. I know, council member, you addressed it. There's still a sense, and I don't know that today's meeting will resolve this issue of feeling like we wanted to be in this, the community wanted to be in this conversation earlier. But I'm going to take one last swing at this set of questions that I'm seeing. It's a theme of questions, and it's really going to, why such a focus right now on rehab, and why this site, we understand why it was chosen, I believe, but why such a focus on rehab? I'll start. Yeah, Councilmember Nadeau.
Okay. I thank you for that question, because we've talked about a lot of other things tonight, not as much about this.
Yeah.
Many of us are aware of the challenges that the neighborhood is facing when it comes to substance use disorder. And it is a long-standing and complex issue for Columbia Heights. And it's exactly why our community was chosen to receive a stabilization center. We have already been working on building out substance use disorder outreach in the neighborhood. When I first became council member, there were a number of different organizations that existed, like Neighbors Consejo with a day program on 16th Street, or before my time, Pedro Hermano with a day program. And Sacred Heart was doing a little bit of a day program. There was an organization called Andromeda that was doing bilingual substance use disorder outreach on the plaza and in Columbia Heights. But many of those are gone now. And so DBH has done a lot of work with the resources they have with the community response teams that are out and about moving across the District of Columbia every day, 24 hours a day. But I knew that we needed some more dedicated resources in Columbia Heights, which is when I brought about the Community Navigator program for the plaza as a pilot, where we had a dedicated person and then 2 dedicated people just to do direct outreach on the plaza. And, that hasn't solved the problem because substance use disorder is a disease and there's a lot of people that have it. But what it has done with that dedicated tool is connect people to services, people who otherwise were simply using public space um, as a place to, you know, for their addiction, right? And giving people a caring face that is doing that engagement, that is doing that support, that is connecting them to services has made a huge difference for so many people on the plaza who are our neighbors, by the way, who are Ward 1 residents. The Stabilization Center also is not going to solve all of our problems. But given the challenges that we have, it's really important to get this resource in our community. I mean, the proximity of the center is going to allow for easier and more frequent treatment for individuals in Columbia Heights. And, I know there's concerns about people being brought to the center from all over the city, and maybe some people will come from other parts of the city, but we have the demand in our own community, and there's not that much space here. So my expectation is that a lot of the people being served there will be right from our neighborhood.
Yes.
And so I know we're low on time, but I'm really passionate about this because these are our neighbors. They're my constituents. Some of them are friends. And I think that we are obligated to do this work. Columbia Heights is a residential neighborhood. It's also a commercial neighborhood. It's also it's got a bunch of schools in it. It's a little bit of everything. Actually, it's a lot of everything. A lot of everything happens in Columbia Heights at all times. Good, bad, and everything in between. But this stabilization center is a chance for us to do a little bit more of the good to address some of the very challenging things happening in our community. So I hope that as we work our way through this process, those who have questions and concerns will come to embrace it because we will have done the work to address those concerns. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. And with that, I see no more space we have so many good questions. It just seems fitting you open this for us, council member, and closing it out with those comprehensive comments seems most appropriate. We personally want to thank you. We really did. We're excited about this stage of the conversation with you. We're looking to keep this open. And as the council member has said, we will, and Dr. Bazran has said, we will look to get this content out to you soonest. We have well over 80 questions that have come in, so we're excited to aggregate those together and get this information out to you, and equally so to invite you to the next conversation coming up here soon. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Bazran to close us out.
I would just like here to emphasize two things. One, Councilmember Nadeau said that it's really important that we look at and we develop a good neighbor agreement. I think that's key. And so I don't want us to lose sight of that. The second thing is that on the slide, in the slide deck, which there was a new site where you can submit your questions and concerns. It's dbh.parkroaddcsc@dc.gov. And I do encourage people to certainly use that site. I think that's very important. We intend to be in continuous contact with the community. We want to hear from you. And together, we can make a real difference for all the citizens within Ward 1. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for your participation. And I look forward to the gems and the information that you can provide to help us as we move forward with this process. Back to you.
Thank you all. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you here in the near future. Thank you so much to our panelists, and all have a good night and a wonderful holiday season.
Night.
Thank you.